Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. I am your host, Jeff Folsham. With me today is my good friend, Mick Beyers, aka McComicker, on places on the internet. Mick is an artist, a comic artist, and a lover of many different subjects. Very many of those things I am also interested in. I'm sure we'll get to a lot of those things. Welcome to the show, Mick.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for saying your last name, because I assumed it wasn't pronounced Foulsham, but that's all I can see. So I've been saying Foulsham in my head since I've seen your name.
I mean, it doesn't bother me how people pronounce it. Call me what you want, just don't call me late for dinner, as they say. But I honestly so that's the way my immediate family says it, right? My dad and his siblings, it's Folsham, but asterisk, however, comma, it is it's an English name. There's a little hamlet in Norfolk, England, called Folsham or Falsham, and every single person I have met on Twitch from England says Falsham. So
well, there you go.
Yeah, I just so when it was like one person from England, I was like, that's interesting. Two people from England, I was like, maybe it's a coincidence. 3, 4, 5 people, I was like, all right, well, I'm just gonna stop correcting people. I was like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, as long as you're spelling it correctly and going to my websites, like patreon.com/Folsham_art. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, say it how you will. But anyway, we're not here to talk about me or my family name. We're here to talk to you about various things. And as I say with all of these podcasts, where better to start but then the beginning? Mick, how did you get interested in art?
It was Silver Surfer, issue number 54, volume 3 from the Ron Mars, Ron Lim run. It was Silver Surfer versus the Rhino in the midst of the Infinity War. No, not Infinity War. Infinity Gauntlet crossover.
Wait. The Rhino, like the guy who dresses up like a rhino.
Yeah. The Rhino breaks
just
into
really strong. He's
the
just
Central
really
Park
strong.
Zoo. Yeah, breaks into the Central Park Zoo, lets all the animals out. Surfer, puts all the animals back, stops the Rhino's rampage. Rhino helps Surfer put the animals back because the cages are for their protection just as much as they are ours. I'm sure there was some sort of larger message related to Infinity Gauntlet that I don't remember because I've never actually read the Infinity Gauntlet series, or if I have, it's been so long I don't remember it. But Ron Lim's art I thought was just amazing and fantastic, and I loved it.
I want to say that answer is amazing for two reasons. One, that's the most specific answer I've gotten to that question from all the artists I've talked to. And secondly, because that's just like a normal street level villain fighting a cosmically powered hero. What is Silver Surfer doing stopping the Rhino?
It was great.
Shouldn't it have been like Spider-Man?
I think Spider-Man may have been dead at the time. They were hanging out at Avengers headquarters, and Surfer's like, screw this, I need to get out of here. And he's just cruising around on his board. It's like, oh, look, there's a tiger. I'll go stop the tiger.
Holy crap, man.
Listen, comics in the 90s were good. They were
No,
real good.
yeah.
Not like comics these days.
Yeah, not comics these days, the ones that we're making. Yeah, no, not these. Holy crap, that is amazing to just picture that in my mind, because no, both of us are, very professed DC Comics fans. But I will say Silver Surfer is one of the characters that I do like from the Marvel universe. I like the really powerful, like cosmic characters, which is one of the reasons why I like DC. They're kind of like fables, right? They're like
Yeah.
way over the top, just like super powerful, like insane characters, right?
Yeah.
And that's like one of the things that I love about the Silver Surfer is like the dude just like absorbs energy and like redirects it. It was like nigh impossible to kill. It's like insane. Plus I had a toy of him when I was growing up back in the 90s.
Was it the wind-up one where you could like scooch his board back and it would like
No, it was just a
across the
normal
floor?
it was just a normal action figure, had posable joints and stuff, but he did come with a surfboard. Had like little pegs on it. You could like stand them on the
Yeah.
surfboard.
Yeah, I had 3 surfer action figures. I had like the one you would like stand on the board and you could like, pull it back and then it would fly about, 4 inches before he would fall off. There's the one like it was super shiny and like the bottom of the board had a ring so you could put it on your finger and like fly him around on the board that way. And then the third one I think was like just the figure. I got it from a cousin, so like I don't know if it ever came with the board. It was just the figure.
Yeah, I can't remember if the one that I had a ring on the board, but the one I had was like super chromed out, like it was super shiny and reflective.
Yeah.
I almost want to say that he was one of the few action figures I had that even had posable ankles. I know I had a Spider-Man toy that had posable ankles.
I had a Spider-Man toy later on, but like up until that surfer point, like, yeah, I don't know that it ever had one. Because, I mean, like, he needed those ankles to be able to stand up.
Yeah.
That no other action figure.
Really so is that, like, speaking of, like, posable ankles, I was very particular with toys as a kid. And the more posable and movable joints they had, the more interested I was in the toy. Do you have any opinions on that? Because I think it's a pretty weird niche kind of like requirement for a child to have about the toys that they play with.
No, I'm with you on that. Because then they could do more things and they could, look more different in more ways. Yeah.
I mean, that Spider-Man toy was one of my favorites because his wrists moved and his ankles moved. And it was very Todd McFarlane, like super, like the joints had like an insane range of motion. It was one of my favorite toys. But yeah, it's interesting though to think because I we've known each other for a while, and it's definitely like a thing in the in your chat on Twitch that you're into, like you prefer DC to Marvel. So it's interesting to know that you actually were like inspired to art in general by a Marvel comic.
Right? It's my secret shame. I don't usually tell people.
Well, now it's it's gonna be it's on the internet now. Everybody knows. But I've given a little bit of insight to why I like DC over Marvel. Not that I don't like Marvel stuff, but just preferences. What draws you to DC over
So Silver Surfer 54 was my first comic. First comic I remember having. The second comic I remember getting was Superman number 50. Volume 2, Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite, Part 4, in which Lois Lane accepts Clark Kent's proposal of marriage, not knowing at the time that he is, in fact, Superman. And it was it was a big number book, 50. So like all the teams involved on the books at the time did something in it. And so like you had a variety of writers, a variety of artists. And it really like hinted at like this larger Superman narrative at the time. And I remember reading before that and enjoying reading, but there was just something about, I think it's just that soap opera feel. And that like, what, you telling me like story comes out every week and these characters do something every week, and like there was just something, magical in that moment that caught my eye. And if I feel like, yeah, I could have gone either way, depending on the book. Like, for whatever reason, the story in Surfer 54 was, contained enough or whatever that, like, I wanted to draw, but I didn't really care about the other heroes they talked about in the books. Whereas, like, with what happened in that Superman issue, I was like, this is fantastic. I knew of Superman. I had seen the Superman movie, and maybe that's what it was, because like none of the other guys, I'd never seen the whole TV show. I don't think even the Captain America Salinger movie had come out. I guess it's just a world I could tap into, and because I got there first, that's kind of where I stuck. And again, because comics were good in the 90s. The DC universe at that time, I felt like, was the joyful, upbeat nature of superheroes, whereas Marvel was the they hate and fear us universe, and that never really appealed to me. I just liked the automatic buy-in. They never had to justify why these people were fighting crime in their underwear. It's just like, I have powers. It makes sense that I put on underwear and fight crime. And like there wasn't any blowback to that. Like I just enjoyed that. I was on board for that, not plausible deniability. What's the term?
Suspension of disbelief.
Suspension of disbelief, right? Yeah. Whereas like in Marvel, it's like, oh, we have to keep it secret, or we have all these extra layers of why, even though we're telling you this is the case, this isn't actually the case because it's got to be real. And I just don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy a lot of urban fantasy for that reason as well, because it's that, it's this hidden world, but like if the world was that big and expansive, it would not be hidden, or like it would have changed our world. But like you're asking me to believe that the world I wake up in every day is also this other place, and I'm not on board with that, because it's too much of an ask for me.
Yeah, so for like the Dresden Files, for example, would be like one of those kinds of stories, right? Where like the things are hidden within our own world, or
Yeah, like I got a book and a half into the Dresden Files, and I just like there was nothing there that like grabbed my attention.
Yeah, I'm more of I'm a very lazy person. I watched the show, which I've heard like the people who like the books, like, oh, the show's shit. I don't know.
But I feel like we always say that about everything.
Right, yeah. But I don't know. The show was like fun enough that I like watched the whole thing. But I do feel that like kind of, why is it always hidden,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But yeah. So do you think, just to get back to like comics specifically, do you think it was just that first exposure to Superman, which is why you fall into the Superman camp specifically? Because I also know that is something that you are in the Superman camp, whereas I am in the Batman camp.
Why am I even having this conversation with you, Batman? I don't know. I like my parents. Like my dad had not collected comics, my mom had not collected comics, but my mom's family had comics off and on when they were kids, even though it was never like a huge thing for them. So I don't actually know who, I got my first comic from, any of that. I really don't know. Uh, I just remember finding that Superman issue under the stairs one day and not knowing where it came from. And I didn't understand collecting comics at that time. It just comics were this thing that occasionally showed up or people knew about. But I didn't know, if we had a comic shop in town, where that comic shop was. I certainly didn't have, money to buy comics. It wasn't until probably the Death of Superman story arc that I really got on board with collecting. And I've always been the kind of person where how I first encounter a thing is typically how I like it. And so Superman was my first exposure in a story sense where I was like, oh, there's this whole world out there. And so I've always liked Superman, starting with undefinable reasons. And as I've gotten older, I've been able to refine those reasons into, I like him because he does or does not do this or that or the other thing.
I mean, do you feel a personal connection to Clark or Kal-El? I mean, whichever side of the
and that's one of the things I loved about that 90s era of Superman is that he was definitely Clark first and then Superman second, right? Which is why I thought he worked so well with Batman, because Batman is a human who, self-identifies as Batman and occasionally has to be Bruce Wayne. And then, Superman was an alien who primarily identifies as Clark Kent and occasionally has to be Superman. And I thought that's why narratively there's such a good team up, because, they're opposites approaching the other person.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And I liked it again. I will go on an endless screed about why comics in the 90s were the best. But even in the 90s, when I was first collecting, I was also on, I was on Team Everyone DC just because I like DC. But I didn't hate Batman to the extent I hate Batman now, because now I feel like Batman is DC looks at Batman as well, this is the only way we can make money. So let's put him everywhere and let's just make him unbelievably badass. And, given 30 minutes of prep, he could defeat God himself without breaking a sweat. I don't know. I'm definitely over Batman now. But the way the universe was built in the 90s and the way they handled guest appearances and the way they did, big company-wide crossovers was very engaging. And it's now a crossover feels well, the world is an endless hellscape. Who would want to live here? Because you finish one crossover that depopulates 30% of the world, and you're immediately into the next one. And it's hard to engage with that storytelling because it doesn't matter what the characters do inside their own books anymore. They've got to get ready for this crossover. And I feel comics in the 90s had a better handle on crossovers, and that wasn't the case. And at this point, I have genuinely forgotten what the question was.
I was just asking if there was something that you personally identify with about the Superman character.
I'm not sure. I guess, I come from a small Kansas town, so I've always taken issue with the way Smallville is portrayed because, it's, population of, at least 40,000. I've seen it up to 100,000. Those are fucking cities, man. I grew up in a town of 15,000 when the college wasn't in session. 10 minutes away was a town of 75 people. That is a small town. And no one, it doesn't feel like anyone has written Superman that like legitimately knows what small town life is like.
It almost makes me want to, like I have aspirations to like write. I have two ideas for Batman stories, but hearing that perspective almost makes me want to write for Superman. Because I'm the same way. Like my town is 9,500 people and about 15K when school is in session.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with you on that front. Like, why it's called Smallville, for God's
Yeah.
sakes? Like, what the
Yeah.
hell? Like, why are you so
And
like
like
100,000 is insane.
yeah, and like Jeff Loeb's Superman for All Seasons, which like constantly is talked about as amazing, is really good. Like I hate that story. Like because I feel like central to its premise is that like, there's this tension between like the farm kids and the towny kids. And it's like that's like no, like that shit doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen where I was at. And like I'm from a small town. So, I feel like it doesn't happen in any small town. Like, okay, it might happen in a small town somewhere. But
But I
like,
don't think it's the norm.
yeah, like it's definitely not the norm. And like there's, multiple high schools in some of these places and they've
What?
got just fantastic sports teams. It's like they have enough kids at these high schools that like that one kid who can actually run isn't on like all six sports teams because he's the only one that can do a sport. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, no, that's exactly you're nailing my entire existence to a T of like what do you mean more than one high school?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so actually growing up, here's the thing, right? So I'm from from a small town like Lock Haven, PA, right? um I actually live in a very small borough between Lock Haven and Mill Hall. When I was a little kid, when I was in grade school and my sisters were in high school, they went to Lock Haven High School, and then there was the Mill Hall High School, um, which I think was just called Ben for some reason. I don't know why they gave it a person's name. Very strange. But when I went into when my older sister, not my oldest sister, so I have two older sisters, right? But when Whitney graduated in 99, I want to say, from high school, she was the last graduating class from Lock Haven High School and or Ben. I mean, she went to Lock Haven, right? But in the year 2000, they combined high schools because they just weren't big
Yeah.
enough.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
they consolidated, right? And I was going into like fucking sixth grade or something like that. I went to public school. I was seventh grade in 2001, so I remember the whole like 9/11 thing. I was like stuck at school all day because it had a bomb shelter. My parents were like, "You ain't coming home." But yeah, no, like literally so small.
Yeah.
We had to combine high schools.
Yeah,
Like,
and like the town I grew up in, like didn't have to combine high schools, but like I knew towns around us that were doing that. Like kids in Shinshin either drove in 10 minutes to go to our school. There was Victoria, I think that like elementary, middle, and high school were all the same building. Like is a
mhm.
legitimately small ass town.
Like there was people going to our school that live in a place called Renovo, and that is by car like a 20-minute drive.
Yeah.
And by bus, it's like 35 minutes.
Yeah. Like I was on the bus for an hour each morning because of where I
Yeah.
was outside of town. Like,
Like that's insane. But yeah, it's interesting to note that you just feel like, or that you don't have like a specific personal attachment to Superman, because that's why I like Batman, I talked about in the first episode. I didn't talk about this specifically, but basically the whole first episode of this podcast is me talking about being adopted and how that's kind of like shaped my entire existence. And the thing that I very much identify with Bruce is that he was raised by Alfred, right?
Yeah.
Like for him, a surrogate father. But, for me being adopted, being raised by someone who's not my blood father, right? That Bruce Alfred relationship is like the thing that I really latch onto about that character. I mean, to a very like less of an extent, like maybe 5% of the reason why I like Batman is I also escaped a very poor life and like ended up being raised by a middle class physician. So there's also that aspect. Like, I'm not a super billionaire by any means, like, dear God, no. But like
Yeah.
I can be like, okay, yeah, this guy had like he had a privileged upbringing, and I'm aware of my luck.
Yeah, like you have a concept of like what privilege is and like what not that. Like you have a concept of what not being privileged is,
Right.
which I think a lot of privilege don't have. Like my mom was an accountant and my dad was professionally ambivalent for a long time. So like, while I lived with my mom, like, okay, I had food, I had shelter, I got, new clothes, I could hang out with friends, I could do things. When I lived with my dad, it was like, well, what are we having for dinner tonight? The other half pound of hamburger we didn't eat the night before.
Yeah, man. Professionally ambivalent. That describes me to a T. But yeah, so it's cool. I don't know. Like, I may have asked this question, so correct me if I'm wrong. No, I'm sure I asked you about like why you like DC over Marvel. What do you think? So like part of what I like about DC over Marvel is, um, that Marvel always seems to deal with like real world stuff, and DC is sort of like, as I think I said earlier in the episode, is like they're like fables, right? They're like the Greek myths of our time. Like, you don't see, even though Clark is just a news reporter, right? You don't see Clark worrying about the rent, right?
Yeah.
And you don't see those like day-to-day struggles. So for me, I also go to DC because I deal with that shit in my own life.
Yeah.
I don't need to see my heroes dealing with that stuff. I understand where people do, but for me, I really enjoy the escapism of DC because I don't have to worry about that stuff for the 15 minutes that I'm reading an issue of like Green Lantern, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, like
You
I remember uh was watching this Neil Gaiman thing once where he's describing like all fiction is fantasy because you're creating a world of your own for your own purposes. And it's like even if it's set in the real world and has real world people, it is fantasy because they're not actually real. They're your versions of these things. And I think that is one of the things I do enjoy about DC is you don't have that you don't have to have that explanation as to why these people are in costumes. And like that's one of the things I don't like about Jeff Johns's versions of Superman. Like anytime he writes Superman, I feel like Jeff Johns includes this little he's wearing long underwear. And it's like I hate that. Like they already exist in a world where people do these things. Like if you don't
yeah.
make a deal out of them, then they're not a big deal. Like I've already bought in that a person can fly. Like buying in that like a person's going to dress up in a costume and fight crime doesn't seem like that much more of an ask for me until you have to make this wink and a nudge about it and
Yeah.
make it make the incongruity of it stick out, where if you just accepted it and moved on, then like I think that's great. And I feel like Marvel does that a lot where, they have to ask you to, I guess, like, I've never been a Spider-Man fan. There's nothing about the Spider-Man character that's really like jumped out at me. And I'm sure part of that is like just that level of exhaustion is like, how's Peter going to pay the rent this week? I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I do feel like, I have a very limited experience with Marvel. Interestingly, my first comic was also Marvel. It was an X-Men comic. I forget, I'm not so great with issue numbers, but I believe it was like a holographic cover with Bishop on the front of it from the 90s. Um but yeah, I don't know, like I don't have a lot of like experience with it as far as like, a company and like across all different things, but like when I was reading the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel stuff, I I appreciated what they were trying to do, right? um I believe she's Pakistani, I believe Pakistani, but Muslim teenage girl living in New Jersey, right? And I like that, representation for the character, but like they just kept harping on it a lot. And
Yeah.
I was like, and she's like, but I'm like a nerd and I'm into video games, but there's like, they never really mentioned what kind of video games she likes. She's like super fan of superheroes, but all she ever really talks about is the, Captain Marvel. It doesn't really go into like, she's like, I don't remember from the first 2 volumes, I don't remember a single scene where she like nerded out about like a hero like we would, or like
Yeah.
nerded out about a video game the way we would. It was all just sort of, I don't know. And there was that whole like, how am I gonna like hide this from my parents and how am I gonna do this? And I think at one point she considers getting a job to be a cover, but you're only going to get fired from the job if you're using that as a cover for your family so that you can go off doing super, like none of it made sense and it all felt very forced. And I was
Yeah.
just like, can't you just like, I don't know, stretch your fist to be real big and punch a bad guy for a minute? Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell? Still, I really like the character as she is one of my favorite characters from Marvel. But there was just that like frustration of like, and I think it's because I'm a DC guy, it's just like,
Yeah.
all right, like we get it, you have a life outside the cape, but like fucking throw on that scarf and let's get going. Like,
Yeah. And like that's like, I think that's why I enjoy the Marvel movies and TV shows so much, is because I feel like
they cut out a lot of that shit.
Yeah, right. And like the Marvel movies and TV shows feel to me like DC Comics from the '90s, where they're just like, you know what? We're here for some good old superhero fun. We can be poignant. We can make, a point about something, but mostly we're just here to be superheroes. Whereas,
Right.
the DC shows and movies are just like, oh, it's so terrible to have so many awesome powers and abilities. Just life is the pits because I'm amazing. And
That's something I've
hate them
never
so
really
much.
picked up on until you've mentioned that right now. I hadn't really noticed that in the comics, there's a lot of kind of that downer feeling in Marvel, whereas their movies are just like action.
Yeah.
Whereas in the comics, DC is like action forward, and then they like drag their feet and get all like introspective or whatever in the movies.
Yeah.
I've never noticed that before.
Yeah, I like that.
But it's so
like,
true. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what? This is backwards.
I started developing that theory about 4 seasons into Smallville, and it was like, why do I hate this show so much? Like, I don't like this show, and why don't I enjoy it? Because like Superman is my favorite, and I should love to see Superman on TV, but like that
Yeah.
version of Clark was just so incredibly whiny. And it's like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
didn't matter how well Ma and Pa Kent parented in that show. Like, Clark could learn no lessons and not grow as a person because he had to be just as whiny next week. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a slog.
And it lasted for 11 years. Like
It was 10
11 seasons.
seasons. 10
Was it
seasons.
only 10? I thought it was 11
Yeah, the
seasons.
11th season was like a comic spin-off. But like,
Oh,
God, it
gotcha.
felt like 11 seasons. It felt like
Right?
fucking forever.
It felt longer than it was, which is terrible for a show, right? Like you
Yeah.
want it to feel less long than it was.
Uh,
But yeah, honestly, why do they even, I don't know. That show, I am not a fan of, like, I'm interested in your perspective on this too, but like I'm not a big fan of taking the character that we know and love from like a specific point in their life and doing a really big thing, like an extended thing in a different period of their life. So like for me, when I want to read a Superman comic, I want to read Clark Kent in Metropolis. He's working at the Daily Planet. He may or may not be married to Lois Lane,
yeah.
like he's, fighting Lex Luthor in like the big robot suit. That's the kind of shit I want to read from, Superman. From Batman, I want him to be in his like late 20s and he's got like a little orphan that he's like trained to like fight crime with him. And
Trained
like
orphans, they're the most dangerous.
right? Like I'm not into reading Clark as a high school student. I'm not into, old man Bruce, like I want
Yeah.
those like specific characters that we've come to know and love. I say that as fully knowing that one of the stories I want to write for a Batman is Old Man Bruce, but
Right. And
that
it's
is
like, I do feel like, those stories do like serve a purpose and have a place. And
they're fun for a few issues. They're fun for a
yeah,
small
but like, I
thing,
feel like
but
where they
10
kind of,
season of a show, I'm
yeah,
not no
yeah.
not into it.
Like, if that's the main continuity, then like, nah, I'm good. I mean, right?
Well,
Like, I
did you
feel like
see
these,
the crossover of the CW shows? Tom Welling didn't even put a suit on for the
I
fucking
like
crossover.
Tom Welling never wanted to put the suit on. Like, when he was making the original show, like, everyone was like, "Is he gonna put the suit on?" No, like, that dude fucking hates being Superman. Like, every interview I've read or listened with that guy, he absolutely does not want to put the suit on. He would rather die than put that suit on. Like,
Why are you
I
playing that part?
I don't understand why everyone thought like, "Oh, he's gonna put this." Like, no, dude has made it abundantly clear he is never gonna put that suit on.
That's wild. Like, why are you even playing Superman if you don't want to be in the cape?
Yeah,
That makes
yeah.
no sense to me. I would be like, if they were, for whatever reason, if they wanted a 600-pound fat ass to play Superman, I'd be like, if I'm not in the cape by like mid season 1, I'm not doing it. Like,
Yeah.
fuck off. Like, no, man. If I'm gonna be Superman, I'm gonna fucking be Superman.
I
Like,
am really excited about the new CW show coming out. I did
oh
really enjoy that
yeah.
guy's version of Superman that he's
Is
done
it?
so
I
far.
keep wanting to say Lois and Clark, but that's not. It's
Yeah.
Superman and Lois, right? That's the
Yeah.
name of that show. Yeah.
But like, every time, and like, it's on the CW. This show is probably going to be trash. But every time
Yeah.
they announce something Superman, I can't stop that part of my soul that is like, yes, this time it's going to be amazing.
I mean, he's a pretty charismatic Superman. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like
really
the
like
couple times he's been in episodes of Supergirl, I have always liked his version of Superman. So
I
I'm
would say, like, the time I've seen him in Supergirl, like, he is by far my favorite live action Superman up to this point.
I'm afraid that Lois is gonna ruin it for me because I do not like that actress playing Lois.
I've never seen her in anything else. Just what I have seen, I like her better than Margot Kidder and Terry Hatcher. Again, like I'm not really counting anyone from Smallville because like it's just I don't know. It's not Superman.
Yeah, and there's not even anything that I can like pinpoint. Just something about the
That
way.
yeah.
Yeah, just there's just something I can't put my finger on it. I'm just like I see her playing opposite the guy who's playing Superman, and I'm just like, yeah. That's like my feeling. It's just like, like just like they could probably have found someone better, right? That's
Yeah.
just my opinion. But I'm still gonna watch the show, and I'll probably watch every episode of it until it's canceled. Just because I'm a total simp for DC. I'm the same way. Like those CW shows are more soap opera than anything else, and there are times when I'm just like, oh come on, just get
Yeah.
to the point already. But I watch the whole episode as soon as it's available on streaming platforms, and I'm in it every single season. I can't not watch them.
I was for a little bit until like I mostly gave up TV in general. Like my wife and I are down to just like 2 or 3 shows at this point. Like I don't watch a lot of scripted television anymore. And
That's
like
probably for the best.
It was all those DC shows that like because I was spending like 6 or 7 hours a week trying to keep up with all my DC shows, and it's I'm not getting shit done. And like just the cold open would start on half of those shows. I'm like, I don't want to watch this. Like I know I already don't care whatever the big thing is this week.
That's a fair point. I did really fall off of Arrow, and
I'll watch the crossovers every year, but that's about it.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing of like I would watch the crossovers and be lost for some of those shows that I hadn't caught up on yet.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think like the part I fell off with Arrow is like you're only miserable because you're making yourself miserable, and like no, I don't feel bad for you being an asshole. Like you could be fine if you would let yourself be fine. So like I don't fucking care that you're miserable, and that's what the show is built on, how miserable you are.
Yeah, and I don't know, just Oliver Queen in general. I feel like the show ran its course after he got saved from that island. Like the first time, like once you're in the flashbacks, like once you get off the island, like I don't care that you like had to go back to the island. And then you once you were he got off the island, then he went was somewhere else, and then he got marooned on the island again, and then he was finally in Star City, and he was the Green Arrow, and then he self-sequestered on I'm like, just either drop it, don't stop, get rid of the flashback fucking motif or whatever you call it, crutch, I guess. And
crutch feels like the best way to describe that.
Or it was something you should have passed the reins to the Flash after that. I don't know. I feel like it overstayed its welcome.
For sure. And that whole thing, oh, they found him on the island, he's been there. And it's no, he spent more time off the island than he did on the island. So his whole journey seems real suspect.
Yeah, what about this that whole I'm a spy in China or whatever the fuck?
Yeah.
What? All right, whatever. But yeah, as we actually start to rag on the things that we love, I think this is a good time to head to break, listen to a little bit of an Anchor and a a Legend Craft ad, and we'll be back with more from Mick Beyers right after this. Do you want to class up your gaming? Are you sick of card tables and cheap plastic sleeves for your character sheets? Do you like real wood and are convinced magnets are the only magic we have left in our current age of science? Then head over to legendcraft.ca to spruce up your tabletop gaming setup. They offer felt top gaming tables with add-ons like cup holders, tablet holders, dice trays, roll boxes, and more. Newly released in January 2021 is their Magna Tracker system. With versions for both health and spell tracking, these sleek and stylish tracking boards come with magnetized tracking pips that allow you to slide them back and forth along clean-cut channels, making tracking your health and spell slots easy to use and read, all without the constant erasing and writing on your character sheet. And did I mention that both the Magna Trackers and the tables are customizable and personalizable? That's right. Your table and or Magna Tracker will be one of a kind when you order at Legendcraft. Legendcraft is partnering with me to offer you a 5% discount on your orders at legendcraft.ca. That's right, you can get a 5% discount when you enter the code F_ART at checkout. That's F_art. Go to legendcraft.ca. That's legendcraft.ca with discount code F_art for 5% off. Legendcraft.ca. Order today. If you like this podcast and would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Folsham_art. With as little as $1 per month, you not only support Thought Balloons and get to submit questions to be answered by myself and the guest host, but you will also have access to my webcomic 3 to 4 weeks before they're released to the public and my weekly update blog. At higher tiers, you'll gain access to full issues and short story comics, and you can even see progress and add input to projects I'm working on. That's patreon.com/FOULSHAM_ART to support Thought Balloons today. And welcome back from the break. Sitting here for part 2 with Mick Beyers. Mick, before the break, we were talking about comics and doing art and all that jazz, but there are a couple other things that of shared interests between us that I'd like to get some insight from you on. First being, I think this will lead into the second thing I'd like to get some of your insight on. But first is you seem to really enjoy radio dramas and talk radio and all that sort of stuff. Where does your interest in radio plays come in? Like, how did that start?
I had a babysitter, I want to say when I was in 5th grade, she was a college student. It was just like an after school thing. I don't remember what we were watching. We were watching some movie, and she's like, you know what movie I think you would really like? The Shadow. So she rented me The Shadow. I absolutely loved it. Next time we were at Walmart, they actually had a 2-cassette collection of old Shadow episodes, which my mother got for me, and I listened to those things until they fell apart. Like, I have probably listened to those 4 episodes hundreds of times. And then, like, it was like when I first got those cassettes, it was, just like pre-birth of the internet. And then like 4 or 5 years later, like the internet was actually a thing and people were starting to put all sorts of stuff on the internet. And I found all these other episodes. And I mean, now I've listened to all the surviving Shadow episodes, probably, dozens of times each. Yeah,
I like it.
And I probably listened to The Shadow exclusively for a few years before I started branching out into other shows. I mostly listen to detective and suspense shows, some of the anthology mystery shows. I don't do the comedy or soaps or like
Yeah, I'm not into that stuff
sketch
either.
shows.
It's like the noir detective stuff that I
Yeah.
really like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me it's because these are like it's 2020. It's not 1920, right? Like these are like this is like radio plays and stuff. Like I think okay, so here's actually I'll finish that thought. Radio plays in general, like it seems like an antiquated thing, like a media of a bygone era, right? And like for me, it was my grandfather who was like, born in the 20s, grew up in the 30s and 40s, right? And so like for me, my love of noir and all that stuff comes from him. But I wonder because I listen to a lot of podcasts, but the kind of podcasts that I listen to are all like interview based stuff, right? Or like topic conversation kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I wonder if radio drama is making a comeback in the podcast scene.
I've listened to a few podcast radio dramas and I don't like them at all. Like,
Really?
yeah, but I think it's like one of the things I enjoy about them is that, and like nostalgia, I don't know, antiquatedness, timeliness of it. Like, I really enjoy reading novels and stories from the like teens to the 50s.
Yeah.
And I don't enjoy reading modern work set in those times because they have to explain things or their modern approaches just set in this time period, whereas like stories from that time have a particular like feel and aesthetic to them that I feel like modern interpretations or like modern stories set back then don't have.
Right.
Right, because it used to be like they wouldn't let you say the word fuck in a book. They couldn't
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah.
imply or acknowledge that, like people had sex. Babies just magically appeared. And like, it's not like those
Yeah.
stories are more honest because they're not like, people had sex and did things. But there's just like this approach in the writing and, acting and dialogue that I really like that feels genuine from them. Whereas the new stuff, these slick production values and legitimate acting, they just really pull me out of the story.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that too. It's
That being
and
said,
I can't speak to the like modern things set in those time periods, but I do get what you're saying about like it's a sort of lack of genuineness, if
yeah,
I'm saying that right.
yeah, it just like I don't know, it just doesn't have that feel. And like, yeah, you could, doctor the audio to make it sound like that, but there's just like I don't know. Like I've listened to these Shadow episodes so much, The Saint, Richard Diamond, Philip Marlowe, same like I don't know. There's just like all that noise and interference you get, from back in the day because of sound quality and radio transmission quality and like all these things that people either don't replicate because it's just junk or they over replicate because it's fun nostalgia that just feels
Yeah.
off. And it's like if I wanted to listen to a modern radio drama, I'd probably just watch a TV show.
Yeah, exactly. No, I definitely like if I were to like look for radio plays or something in podcast form, I would want them to be a throwback, right? Like I don't want to listen to a radio drama of, someone being like, "Oh, like can you believe that Susie fucking leaked my nudes on Instagram?" Like, I don't know. Like
Right?
that's no, like I don't want that. Like what I what I want, and it's something like again with a kind of like you're saying, like sort of like the junk in it is like the scratchy like recording and like all that stuff is like we have like way better fidelity microphones and all that kind of stuff now. And no longer do we have to talk like this because our
Yeah.
microphones just can't pick up the lower registers of our voices. Like, that's not an actual accent that exists in the real world. Like,
Yeah.
that is specifically designed so that you could actually hear and understand them on the quality of equipment that was available back then.
Yeah.
Like, and if you do that now, it just feels weird.
Yeah.
It just feels weird. So yeah, the whole thinking about the aesthetic and the timeliness of those things, that's something I definitely definitely agree with. I don't know if you saw, speaking of Instagram, I don't know if you saw on Instagram, but I last week I posted like a whole sheet of spaceships that I had drawn for this role-playing show that I'm going to do later this year, called Spaceship Zero and the Slave Ship of Despair. Spaceship Zero was a radio drama back in the 40s or 50s, I think, and then
It's like the 40s and 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like a German like sci-fi show in the 70s, and they made a movie of it in like 2004, 2009, somewhere around there. I don't remember. But I was talking to my dad about this, and he was born in 1946. Right after World War II, and he grew up as a kid in the time period in which I was trying to capture that sort of aesthetic. And I was like, man, this is like, it's like really hard. Like, I don't want to just have like, like that stereotypical cartoony rocket ship and then paint it chrome like you see on the cover of so many pulp books from that time period. But like, that was kind of the style, but I was trying to ride that line between 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's so funny, just to kind of like show an example of that, what you were talking about, like timeliness and how like you're just of the period, right? You're not trying to recreate something. But I was like trying to, like, I showed him some of the pictures, and I was trying to explain to him like what my like goals were. He's like, just draw a spaceship. Like, what's the big deal? I was like, because to him, that's just what spaceships are, right?
Yeah.
Like, he grew up in that time period. He doesn't like grasp that sort of like he definitely sees the change, right? Like, he understands like there's a difference between Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. There's going into the 60s with the original Star Trek, going into the 70s and 80s with Star Wars, right? And like he knows how things have progressed. But when I try to describe, I mean, he's also not an artist, so there's like a bit of a gap there that I have to bridge. But like, he's just like, I don't get what, so like, just draw a rocket ship. He's like, I don't understand, like, why are you putting so much thought into this? And I was like, well, because like in the 50s, like 40s and 50s, when they were drawing spaceships and stuff, it's like you have to take into consideration that these people were designing because they knew that the spaceship had to leave Earth, right? They had to get off the ground and fly through an atmosphere at least a little bit, right? Whereas now, your spaceship could be a flying donut. It doesn't really matter. It could be a literal rectangle, like, because now in modern sci-fi, you can just build it in space and you never have to worry about an atmosphere and stuff like that. And he actually said some things like, he's like, you can make it whatever shape you want. Space doesn't have air. I was like, yeah, but like, I'm not doing a show in a time period in which you can just build shit in space. Like, we're talking to like 50s era mindset here. Like, even if, even if the show is set in the far-flung future of, 2015 or whatever it is, like, you still, like, they were still designing, from what their viewpoint of modern was, right? Like, I don't think anybody in the 50s ever considered building something
Yeah,
from
like what you could build
space.
up there. Yeah, it
Like,
wasn't a
like,
thing.
yeah, no, you have to build it on Earth and then, like, take off through the atmosphere. So it had to have some kind of aerodynamics, some kind of wings for, like, stabilization and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and you need a little bit of that. And, and from a design point, right, from a design aesthetic, like, you have to take those kinds of things into consideration. And it's very interesting to, like, to throw that in the mix as, like, a point of, like, when you are in that time period, you're just designing stuff, right?
Yeah,
And now, if you were to go back and try to recapture the magic of that era, there is so much data that we have to, like, delete from our brains and, like, retrain ourselves, to think differently in order to make it feel genuine.
yeah. Like you end up doing like more work or backwards work to make the
Yeah.
current thing fit that old time period. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's been a while since, like, I've watched some noir stuff. And even longer since I've listened to, like, actual radio dramas. But, like, I'm pretty sure, like, the most intense, like, detective work, like, forensics wise, was, like, they could figure out blood types and fingerprints, and, like, that's it. Like, that's like the cutting edge stuff, is, like, blood types and
Yeah,
fingerprints.
yeah.
And
And
it
like
was a
that's it.
lot
If
of
they can't do it
legwork.
off of that, then who knows? Right? Like I was
Yeah.
talking to Evie and Rebecca about this the other day, is that cell phones ruined so many stories because
Yeah.
a lot of it used to be I have information, I don't know where you are, I don't know how to get to you, I don't know how to find you, or like, hey, I'll just shoot you a text.
Right. Yeah. No, it does. They definitely remove a lot of the mystery of things. Or, like, especially, like, now, right? Like, I don't even know how you, like, people write a show like Law and Order. I mean, I guess that's off the air, but I guess SVU is still going, or, whatever. Any of those kinds of, like, procedural shows. Like, especially in light of, the what are we calling the Capitol insurrection of January 6th? Like,
Yeah.
in light of an event like that, where the people who were perpetrating those crimes were filming themselves, live streaming themselves, posting their crimes to Insta. How do you write a detective show about, like,
Right?
oh, well, Gary did go pick Gary up
Yeah.
at, the where he works at the Five and Dime. Just, like,
Yeah.
you can't, like, there's no mystery left when everything's recorded and plastered on the internet.
Yeah.
It's oh man, I didn't expect to get sad during this conversation, but, like, a part of me is like, are we leaving an era in which detective work is, like, interesting?
And like I don't read like so a lot of what I read are like detective novels from the 50s and 60s. And I read a few modern ones, but they're certainly not to me as interesting. And like I think part of it is the uh like the detective is such a culture, the private detective or detective novel is like such its own cultural phenomenon that you know I feel like you can't read a detective novel without the detective novel referencing other detective novels. Like, in how many detective novels do they make a joke at the expense of Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe? Yet in Sam
Yeah.
Spade and Philip Marlowe stories, like, they're just people doing a job. And like, even they will occasionally, reference and make fun of like Sherlock Holmes. So I guess it's always kind of a thing. It just feels more out of place now. And like, again, I'm sure there is
wonder,
a good novel somewhere. I'm not actually interested in reading enough to find it.
That's fair. No, I get that. I just wonder like what the detective story is gonna be like in 20 years, in 50
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Like, I just, part of me feels like I might be too young to start feeling this way already, but like, part of me is just like, was it better back then? Like that kind of like feeling, but like, it is sort of just, and I'm sure people will come up with like interesting ways to keep the genre alive and all that, but like, it really is with like CCTV and the internet and constant posts and things on social media. It really does seem to be like, unless you're dealing with like super criminals, like in the sense of like not like Brainiac, but like super criminals in the sense of like Moriarty, right? Like just really intensely smart and like planning and conniving people who like are aware of the constant surveillance state that we live in to like do things to avoid detection, because like we are willfully removing a lot of the mystery of life from our own lives.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know
Exactly.
and that is the quintessential part of a detective story. It's the puzzling together of mystery, and if everything's just available.
Yeah. Like, if, it's real easy to reconstruct timelines if everyone is always somewhere and you know where they are.
Well, just going back to the Capitol thing, I don't know the website off the top of my head, but they literally have, not only have they built the entire timeline through like live stream clips and Instagram posts or whatever, I guess Parlor, it was the website they were using.
Oh, yeah.
But just social media posts and streams and video clips and all that stuff. Not only have they pieced together the exact timeline, there's a website out there that basically is a Google Maps overlay, and you can click on little dots and see the video footage from that specific spot. They have triangulated every single video
right.
clip.
Like, that is the part that I find fascinating.
It's really weird.
Well, and like, from a storytelling point of view, like, you no longer need a specialist to do a lot of these things. Like, and because I'm like desperately searching my mind for an example, I can't think of one. But like, a lot of times it's just hobbies. Like, people who program, for fun, or like maybe they program at a job, but like they're not forensics analysts or anything. Like, they're just people who know how things work and can reconstruct these things. And it's like, you no longer need to hunt down that one guy in the world that knows how to do this exact thing, because, a million people know how to do that thing, and they're all an email away.
Yep. Well, there's like a whole Reddit like community, right? Like multiple subreddits and stuff about solving mysteries and things.
Yeah, and like, they can do that shit because like, you just need brain power, and that's all the brain power you need. Like, it's fascinating, the world we live in, and just like the barrier between I don't know, the barrier between ability or between just the barrier between like I need a person who can do a thing and it's no longer, a specialized profession that only one hermit in Bavaria studying his whole life can do. Like a million people can do it. You just need to Google them.
Right. Yeah. It makes me wonder if there's any substance to writing a I don't know if you would call it like a dystopian story, but like it almost makes me wonder if you could write maybe like cyberpunk or something about how there are no cops anymore, like no more detectives, because sites like Reddit solve the mysteries as a crowdsourcing detective
Yeah,
force.
that's actually a super cool idea. I would read that story. That could be really amazing.
Did I just come up with like a cool idea on I should
Yeah, I think
need
you
to remember
did.
to
You might not want to post this half of the podcast. You want to save this half, save it for later.
I'll just sorry,
It is only half an episode this time. It's fine.
sorry, half of it, something weird happened, an act of God, lost the second half. Can I'm gonna keep that in because I'm not the person to write that. But if someone listens to this and thinks it's a good idea and they want to fucking write, I'll read that story. I'll watch that show, like read the comic, whatever. Like, but I do think it's like could we? Because like I don't know, man. Like after all of the shit from last year and all, like the political shit about like we don't need cops, and I'm wondering like could we crowdsource a lot of this stuff? Like is that possible? Like how far down this rabbit hole can we go? Like it could be a thing, maybe, who knows. um but yeah, no, in a lot of ways, when I talked to Ethan Brewerton in our episode, he's a very like forward thinking guy. He likes the cyberpunk, he likes the futuristic kind of, stuff, or near future kind of thing. But I think you and I, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I look back like we would rather be living in 2 whiskeys and a pack of cigarettes for breakfast, kind of times. Like,
yeah, like I did used to.
What's power steering?
I don't need that. Yeah,
I want running boards on my car that I can shoot a Tommy gun from. Like,
sci-fi used to be like my go-to genre, and I thought everything I did would be, sci-fi based. And the more I do, like the less of it is sci-fi based, and like the less that kind of like futurism is I find, interesting enough to want to develop a story in. And like I don't know exactly how or why that happened, but it just did.
So there's not like a moment that you can pinpoint where you're just like, oh wow, that movie or that show or something.
Yeah, like I still really like The Expanse is probably my favorite scripted show right now. I enjoy watching The Expanse. I enjoy reading The Expanse books. I really like that aesthetic. I still very much enjoy, like Star Trek and the different Star Treks. But I don't feel compelled to, like create my own version of Star Trek anymore, which I used to. Like, some of my like earliest scraps of story fragments, are all science fiction based, and like, what do I love about Star Trek? How do I make that a story, without it being Star Trek, and like that kind of thing. And I don't, anytime I sit down to do a new project, it's, like sci-fi is frequently not on the list of like, oh, where should I set this? How should it be a thing? And frequently it is like, okay, this is a 50s detective. This is a 30s whatever who solves a mystery. This is a
Yeah.
20s, someone who solves a mystery. And like, that's just where
Right.
I end up these days, way more than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, it's like the noir thing is definitely the aesthetic. Like, again, it goes back to my grandfather. I used to watch a lot of he was a film buff. For someone who was born in 1989, right? And like is living in the 2020s, you wouldn't think that I would like love the Marx Brothers and be into like Humphrey Bogart movies, but that was the kind of stuff that I watched with my grandfather when I was a real little kid and spending summers at his house in South Carolina. Like he had, I guess you call it like pit furniture. I don't know. These giant like 10 people like couches that like were in a U shape with like an ottoman in the middle, and he had a big screen TV, and it would just be like super late at night, way later than a kid, who was like 7, 8, 10 years old, way later than I should have been staying up at that age, but it would be everyone else would be asleep, and it'd just be me and him watching these like old like detective movies, shit that I probably shouldn't have been watching anyway. Not even like divorced of whatever time of day, just like, should I really be watching The Big Sleep at 10 years old? Like, is that an appropriate film to be showing that? But like, those are all very, and I like that black and white, very hard shadow. I love Sin City. I'm a big fan of the art in like Hellboy, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And like, I do like writing, like, and trying to do stories in that genre, but there's a lot of stuff that I consume that I personally don't really want to like write stories about.
Yeah.
What's really weird, is as far as like what we consume versus what we create. I really, really like, as we've discussed, I really like DC because it's that sort of escapism thing. When I write my fantasy stories, right? Like the first issue of Ozrin Tales, the first 2 pages of the Ozrin Tales is Fonkin and Milos talking to their landlord about how they're 2 months late on rent. Like, it's the exact thing that I don't want to read about, but I
Yeah.
feel like I'm compelled to like write about it. And I guess it's sort of like a therapy thing on my end. But I I think that is all to say that it's, I think, healthy in some way to have interests that lie outside what you want to create, or vice versa, right? Like, a lot of people, I think, as kids or whatever, we latch on to like a certain thing because we haven't experienced a lot of stuff yet, and we like the idea of drawing a comic or making a movie, and so we've only experienced a small slice of it, so it's like, that's what I'm gonna do, right?
Yeah.
But eventually we watch westerns, and we watch noir movies, and we watch romance and comedy and all this other stuff, and even if we still really enjoy like the sci-fi or whatever, that may not be what we feel compelled to create. And I think it's both natural and healthy to like not get pinned into one thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I do bounce around genres a lot. I just,
Mm-hmm.
I always assumed the majority of what I did would be sci-fi. And like my very first webcomic was a sci-fi based webcomic. And like, it's in the long list of things I'd like to get back to someday. But I have no idea when that day will be.
Right.
And like,
Yeah,
I'm not really like stressed about it anymore. I used to be like, oh, I know I need to finish this thing so I can get back to this thing. I need to finish this thing so I can go over to that thing. Like, I don't even have that anymore where it's like, I want to draw this. I need to come up with a story that can justify me drawing this, which like frequently these days is like, I want to draw like curvy, busty women.
Right.
What kind of story do I need to justify that?
When you say you bounce around a lot of genres, like that is definitely something that I enjoy about your work. When I first met you, you were working on Hollow, which is what 17 when was 1700s, right? Like
Yeah, it's like
1800s.
1790s. Yeah.
Yeah, and but infused with Cthulhu mythos, right? And then I know you've done Western stuff. I've seen you work on that. I know you've worked on like noir things. Right now you're working on like a sort of uh Tarzan, Conan, kind of He-Man, like barbarian kind of like deal.
Yeah.
Like yeah, you're all over the place and I love that. Like I want to like I've done noir and I've done high fantasy and I've done like fantasy westerns. A lot of my stuff has like that magic and fantasy bend to it just because fucking wizards and magic are cool, but like why not house that in multiple genres and play with style, right? Like it's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like as I'm trying to finish writing the bulk of the series that is the Osrin Tales, I've done 3 issues. I'm trying to write the rest of the fucking 20 to 50 issues that I want that series to be. And while I'm doing that, I just started writing some scripts for a 6-page comic about the backstory for my character that I play in Allhaven, which is a bi-weekly fantasy western RPG that I'm playing with some of the people on my stream team. And I was like, you know what? Calvin Beck is pretty cool. He's got like Magneto-like powers. He can like levitate metal and use it like as projectiles and stuff. And he's kind of sold his memories because he was dying in the desert and some like beetle shaman came up to him and was like, hey, I can save your life. And I was like, I think it'd just be really cool to like explore his backstory in a comic. And now it's become a thing where I'm gonna do a comic for all 6 of the characters that will be involved in there, and they're all going to be 6 to 7 page 6 to 8 page mini comics. I'm gonna put it all into one book, so I'm looking at what 36 to 48 pages of comic to do, and that's hopefully gonna tide me over for a while, because like I like drawing comics, but the project that I want to be doing right now is taking a really, really long time to write, because what I'd really like to do is write the whole fucking thing and then I just
Yeah.
get to draw for a while.
Yeah.
So long that I forget how to write, and it will take me 3 years to write the thing after that. But,
It's kind of what I'm doing now, like especially my Western comics, since I'm trying to color it myself, is that it's like, okay, I'm gonna write the whole thing so that I can just go through and draw it, and then I'll just draw the whole thing so I can go through and color. And it's like I haven't stuck to that, but
right.
I'll go through and I'll write a batch of pages, I'll draw a batch of pages, I'll color a batch of pages, and like by the time I get back to the next step of the process, like as I cycle through, it's like, oh shit, I don't remember how to write this, or like I don't remember how I was drawing this. And the more pages I leave myself to color in a batch, like the more I hate it and the more I want to give up, because the more I color, the more I hate life.
Yeah.
It's definitely
neither
like,
of us are colorists.
yeah, like it's something I need to, either just do or admit that I don't want to do. And I need to figure out, like, is it going to be better for me if I do save it all as a batch so I don't forget how I did this particular thing on this particular page, even if I'm going to hate myself? Or, should I just do the 2 pages at a time I can stomach and then come back later and figure it all out again to do the next 2 pages? Because I've done it a few times where I've gotten those 2 pages down. I've remembered what I was doing. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep coloring because I remember what this process is. But then, like, the longer that process goes on, the easier, well, not the easier the technical aspect of it gets, not the creative aspect of it gets. Like, I start to hate it. Like, coloring grinds down my artistic soul in a manner that is just inevitable and frustrating, and just like I get angry. I try not to color on strain because I get angry and I just
Right.
start cursing a lot and I start throwing shit around and I get super negative, and like that's not very entertaining to watch. So like I
Yeah.
don't color on stream anymore. It's a bad idea.
I know you use Clip Studio, right?
Yeah.
You're not you don't do anything in Photoshop.
No.
Um I would, if I were you, I would look into seeing if the debaser thing works in Clip Studio. I know they just did an update or something that allows Photoshop brushes to be imported into Clip
Yeah.
Studio, but I don't know if you can import patterns and actions yet. But the debaser thing is just, it's classic print comic textures. So like, it's all the Ben-Day dots or screen tones, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Like, and it is so both really fun to create stuff that looks like classic print comics, but it's also kind of super easy to do that. Like, they give you like a batch of like 124 colors or something, and then they give you like charts. It's like, okay, you want to do a golden age comic, well, here's the 24 colors of this batch that you get to use. You want to do a silver age comic, here's the 48 or 64, whatever it is, that you get to use from this batch of colors that we've given you. You want to do like a bronze age, like 90s style comic, go hog wild, use any of the 124 colors that we have, and then you can do like shit over top of it, right? You can like do multiply layers and like other brushes and like all that shit and like make it whatever. But like, definitely as far as like flatting and stuff goes, like, just, okay, character A has skin tone and the skin tone is number 14, or whatever, on this list. They're all numbered and everything. It makes it really easy to like call it up again, and
Yeah.
like,
And that's called debaser?
yeah,
I'll have to look that up. All right, hold
Debaser. It's
on. All
on
right.
True Grit Texture Supply. I can send you a link after the show if you want, but yeah, no, it's great. I use pretty much right now, like everything I use is almost exclusively from True Grit, just because I like that kind of, I love working digitally for the quick, easy, tools usage.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I hate about digital artwork is how pristine and clean and mechanical it looks. I miss working traditionally for the aesthetic of ink seeping into paper and
I like
all
the
that
more I
stuff.
work traditionally or digitally, like I do not miss digital at all or traditional at all. Like I've done a couple of traditional things, since I got my
Mhm.
tablet monitor, and I hate every second of it. And like that first time I reach for the undo button with the pen in my hand, I'm like, motherfucker, I've got to start this shit over,
Right.
draw it, erase it, whatever. Like, absolutely not worth it to me. Like, oh man, I can't even think of the last time I doodled traditionally. And like, I do not miss it at all.
I still do. Well, I did my layouts for the noir thing I did in last October. I did all of that digitally, but that was something I was doing with my Twitch community, so I was like doing it all on stream and stuff. I
Yeah.
still like doing my pencils traditionally, and then taking pictures of them, putting them in the computer, and then inking and coloring digitally. But no, I mean, I when I went to school, I learned traditional stuff. I didn't have very many digital classes. Uh, that's so there's like that kind of like, I do like I do actually like inking, on paper. Like I do enjoy that as a process. But I will say I prefer working digitally, because of just like the tools, and it's way easier. You can make more mistakes. It's not as like, oh man, I messed that up. Let me dump a bottle of whiteout on this, and correct it or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but what I don't like about digital is like, I'm just gonna use a hard round brush and maybe I'll squeeze it into an oval so I can get like that thin thick kind of thing, but it's all just very hard clean edge. Like I'm not a fan of that. What I like, so that's why I've gone to True Grit, is like these are like crunchy crispy brushes that look dirty. They look like they are, and it's because they are actually sampled from actual pens and brushes and stuff, but like they've got like that deckled edge, right? That mottled crunchy edge that gives texture and life to those lines that you can only get by having ink bleeding into paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then if you slap a page texture on top of that, like it looks pretty damn good. you know and you get all of the benefits of digital and you still get that traditional aesthetic. Like
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people who work traditionally and like still, and they're like, well, if you're just trying to get traditional, why not just do traditional? I'm like, because lasso tools and transform and
Yeah. Undo.
guidelines
Yeah.
and grids and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
this stuff that, and the debaser pack, so I don't actually have to color anything. I still have to physically like color in. That's one bad thing about the way like the masking layers and stuff work within debasers. Like for whatever reason I can't just use my lasso fill for it, which is kind of a bummer. Like I have to physically like actually color in things, and maybe I'm just doing it wrong. Like, maybe I'm not using the right tools or something. But I don't have to like, I don't know. It's nice to be able to just click on the layer, select the color, do that whole color on the whole page. I don't
Yeah.
know. There's something about it, and then it just looks cool because it's got all the little dots in it and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's fun. I
Like
like
I feel
it.
like it's not so hard to recreate that. Like, well, and like a lot of those artifacts come from the actual printing process, which you may not be going through. Like, those
Right.
dots and stuff. Like they didn't do that in the coloring stage. Like that was a product of the printing process, which
Right.
you don't have access to. So like if you want that look
You have to do
on
it tradition. You have to do it some other
digit,
way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because digital printing, it's not. You don't. Those are, you can get smooth ass motherfucking colors, right?
yeah,
You don't have to have like, three red dots and two yellow dots to make an orange anymore. You can just print
yeah.
orange, you know, or even more accurately, you don't need three magenta dots and two yellow dots to make it red. Right? Like you can just fucking print whatever color you want.
Yeah,
And we print on different paper, right? Like we print
yeah.
on
Like
high
part of that was how
glossy.
the paper
You're
would
not,
soak it up. Yeah,
yeah, you're not printing to newsprint anymore. So
yeah. Like every
yeah,
step of the process is different, not
yeah,
just
every
the
single thing is
not
different.
just the art step. So like you can't Yeah, it just, the process has changed, and like you can get any look you want now. It's just, what is the best way to go about getting that look?
You and I are just men born in the wrong time.
Although, like, I will say, I like not dying of, common communicable diseases. So it's a give and take.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I am sort of a pessimist and a fatalist, and if dying of emphysema at 48 was like what I had to do to live, back. If getting drafted into World War II is when I have to be a hard grizzled PI who drinks whiskey in 10 a.m.
I mean, everyone has to make sacrifices.
I mean, let's face it. If I was drafted, I probably would have died in the war. I wouldn't have made it home. But oh man, there's a romanticism about those characters for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, hell.
Yeah, and I think like they're just so.
I look drunk most of the time because I don't shave. Does that count?
Yeah, good. Close enough.
But oh man, it's been fun reminiscing with you. I think we have uncovered a lot of ground here, and I know you have work to do. I know I have work to do today. But yeah,
there's always more shit to draw.
Right. I get to go draw more spaceships. There's at least 2 more spaceships I have to draw for this project that we're going to be doing this summer, and then so much more after that. But yeah, from I don't even remember how I was going to sign off. Anyway, like I said, we're both out of time, out of sync with the reality that we live in, and I think that's why we're good friends.
That's why it works. Yeah,
right.
No, for sure.
All right, from me here at Thought Balloons, I just want to ask you if there is any final words you have for our listeners, and where can they find you on the internet, and what are you doing?
I am McComicker, McComicker on the socials, which for me are Instagram and Twitter and Twitch, which I really try to be good about updating, but like social media is easily even more than coloring. Social media is just like the worst part of what I do. It really is. But yeah, that's where I am on social media. I have multiple comics up on Webtoons currently. The one I'm working on right now is called Brondigo, which is, like a He-Man-esque cartoony kind of strip I'm trying to do. And it's got 4 chapters up. I am working on the, final installment for now currently. I don't know what I'm going to be doing after I wrap up with Brondigo yet, but that's what I'm working on.
Maybe it'll be a sci-fi thing.
Maybe.
But yeah, Mick, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, no, it was great.
I had a lot of fun. We got to talk about our passions of comics and detectives and all sorts of wonderful things. I hope you'll join me in the future. But for now, you have a great day, and all of our listeners, have a week.